Stop her! Don't let her get away! Vanessa's shrill command cut through the thunder. Clara stumbled, the hem of her uniform stained with wine. She turned, gasping. I didn't take it! I swear, I didn't! Mrs. Vaughn's face appeared at the top of the steps, cold and cruel, as she threw a ceramic plate at Clara, cutting her arm. Don't lie, you ungrateful girl. The necklace doesn't vanish by itself. I didn't. Please, ma'am, I'd never steal. Clara's words cracked beneath the weight of disbelief. Her palms trembled as she clutched her apron. She looked from face to face, guards, servants, even the butler, everyone watching in silence. No one dared defend her. Enough! Mrs. Vaughn's voice cracked like a whip. Get out of my sight, before I have you arrested. Clara was a 20-years-old orphan who had taken this job to support herself, and at this moment, she had never felt more worthless. The journey to that moment, however, began in the darkest place Clara had ever known. 2 years before the incident, Clara had arrived at the Vaughn estate with nothing but a worn suitcase and desperate hope. The mansion towered over her like a castle from another world, with its iron gates, manicured gardens, and windows that seemed to judge her threadbare coat. Mrs. Vaughn, a woman whose face had been lifted so many times it barely moved when she spoke, looked Clara up and down with undisguised distaste. You'll start at 5 a.m, Mrs. Vaughn said, her voice cold and clipped. Breakfast must be ready by 7. You'll clean all 15 rooms daily, do the laundry, and stay out of sight when we have guests. Your quarters are in the basement. Questions? Clara shook her head, swallowing her pride. She needed this job. Her brother Marcus was only 12, living with their elderly aunt in a rural town 3 hours away. The money from this position would pay for his school fees, his meals, his future. She could endure anything for that. What she didn't anticipate was Vanessa. Vanessa Vaughn was 22, beautiful in the way that money could buy, with professionally highlighted hair and a walk that suggested the world existed to serve her. From the first day, she seemed to sense that Clara was different from the previous maids, who had been older women too tired to care about the family's cruelty. Clara was young, she had dreams in her eyes, and Vanessa made it her personal mission to extinguish them. Did you actually think these napkins were folded correctly? Vanessa would say, sweeping an entire table setting onto the floor. Do it again. And this time, try not to be completely useless. Clara would bite her tongue and start over, her fingers working quickly, efficiently, perfectly. But perfect was never enough. The social media torture began in month 2. Vanessa started recording Clara's every move, posting videos with captions like, "When the help thinks she's people," and POV, "You hired someone who doesn't know a salad fork from a garden tool." The videos went viral in Vanessa's wealthy social circle, thousands of likes mocking Clara's existence. One video showed Clara scrubbing the kitchen floor on her hands and knees at midnight, exhausted after an 18-hour shift. Vanessa had zoomed in on her face, adding a laughing emoji filter. The caption read, "Some people were born to serve. Know your place." Clara saw the video when another staff member, an older housekeeper named Betty, showed it to her with tears in her eyes. Betty had worked for families like the Vaughns for 30 years and had seen it all, but even she was shocked by Vanessa's cruelty. "You should quit, honey," Betty whispered. "This isn't worth it. No job is worth this." But Clara thought of her future. She returned to work the next morning at 5, as always. The night everything changed began like any other. Mrs. Vaughn was hosting a charity gala, one of those events where wealthy people paid thousands of dollars per plate to feel good about themselves while treating the staff like furniture. Clara spent the entire day preparing, polishing silver, arranging flowers, ensuring every detail met Mrs. Vaughn's impossible standards. The guests arrived in luxury cars, dripping in diamonds and designer labels. Clara moved through the crowd like a ghost, refilling champagne glasses and clearing plates, her presence acknowledged only when something went wrong. That's when Vanessa orchestrated the wine incident, deliberately bumping into Clara and then blaming her for the spill. The humiliation was calculated, performed for maximum impact in front of the most influential guests. The crystal wine glass shattered against the marble floor, red liquid spreading like blood across the pristine white tiles. Clara froze, her maid's uniform soaked from the deliberate accident Vanessa Vaughn had just orchestrated. The laughter that followed cut deeper than any blade. "Look at her!" Vanessa sneered, her phone already recording. "This is what happens when you let people like her into decent society. They can't even hold a simple glass without making a mess." Clara's hands trembled as she knelt to pick up the shattered pieces, her cheeks burning with humiliation. Around her, the Vaughn family's dinner guests whispered and giggled, their expensive jewelry glittering in the chandelier light. "This is exactly why I told Mother we needed to hire from a professional agency," Vanessa announced to the crowd, her voice carrying across the ballroom. "But she insisted on giving charity cases a chance, and this is what we get." Clara felt every eye in the room on her as she cleaned up the mess, her uniform stained, her dignity shattered. She heard the whispers, saw the phones recording, knew that by morning she would be a joke across social media again. But she didn't cry. Not then. She finished cleaning, returned to the kitchen, and continued working. The real nightmare began 2 hours later. Mrs. Vaughn's diamond necklace went missing. It was a family heirloom worth $200,000, and it had been in Mrs. Vaughn's bedroom that afternoon. Now it was gone. Clara was cleaning the hallway when she heard Mrs. Vaughn scream. Within minutes, the entire household was in chaos. Security was called, staff were questioned, and Vanessa, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, pointed directly at Clara. "She was in Mother's room today," Vanessa said. "I saw her, around 3 o'clock. Clara's blood ran cold. "I was cleaning, yes, but I never touched—" "Search her quarters," Mrs. Vaughn commanded, her face twisted with fury and something that looked like vindication, as if she'd been waiting for an excuse to validate her prejudices. The security team tore through Clara's tiny basement room, dumping out her belongings, rifling through her few possessions. They found nothing, because there was nothing to find. But the absence of evidence didn't matter. In the Vaughn's world, accusation was conviction. Clara stumbled as plates after plates hit her. She turned, gasping. "I didn't take it! I swear, I didn't—" Mrs. Vaughn's face appeared at the top of the marble steps, cold and cruel, even in the downpour. "Don't lie, girl. The necklace doesn't vanish by itself." "I didn't. Please, ma'am, I'd never steal." Clara's words cracked beneath the weight of disbelief. Her palms trembled as she clutched her apron. She looked from face to face, guards, servants, even the butler, everyone watching in silence. No one dared defend her. Vanessa crossed her arms, a triumphant smirk curling her lips. "Oh, come on, Mother. Look at her. She probably sold it already. People like her don't know the value of honesty." Laughter followed, sharp, mocking, like knives slicing through what little pride Clara had left. She took a step back, shaking her head. "I've worked here for 2 years. You know me. Please, I didn't—" "2 years of opportunity," Vanessa interrupted, her eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. "6 months of plotting and planning? Thieves like you never change. You come from nothing. You'll always be nothing." "Enough!" Mrs. Vaughn's voice cracked like a whip. "Get out of my sight, before I have you arrested." The rain began as they threw her out. Clara stood in the driveway, her belongings scattered in the mud around her, as the mansion's doors slammed shut behind her. Through the windows, she could see the family laughing, celebrating as if they'd removed a tumor. Vanessa was already on her phone, probably posting about the drama. Clara looked up at the grand house, rain mixing with the tears she finally allowed to fall, and made herself a promise. A promise that would fuel every decision, every sacrifice, every sleepless night for the next 5 years. Never again would anyone make her feel this small. Never again would she be powerless. Never again. The next morning, Clara woke up on a bench in a public park, her body aching from the cold, her stomach empty. She had $17 in her pocket, no references, no home, and a name that was now associated with theft across social media. Vanessa's latest video, titled "When Maids Go Bad," had 300,000 views. Most people would have broken. Clara got up and walked to the nearest diner. She begged for work and was given a position washing dishes for minimum wage, paid under the table since she had no permanent address. The work was brutal, 8-hour shifts standing in scalding water, her hands raw and bleeding by the end of each day. She slept in a homeless shelter, sharing a room with 15 other women, and used the shelter's address to open a bank account where she deposited every dollar she didn't need for immediate survival. 3 months later, she had saved enough for a security deposit on a tiny studio apartment, barely bigger than a closet. But it was hers. She bought a mattress from a thrift store and cried the first night she slept there. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of having a door she could lock, a space that belonged to her. It was during this time that she met Elena Cruz. Elena was 72 years old, a retired businesswoman who had built and sold a chain of home care services before most people knew what entrepreneurship meant. She ran a small mentorship program for women from low-income backgrounds, offering free business classes in a community center every Saturday morning. Clara almost didn't go. She was working double shifts at the diner by then, had picked up weekend cleaning jobs at an office building, and Saturday mornings were her only time to sleep. But something in the flyer she'd seen, something about the words "build your own future," pulled her out of bed at 6 in the morning. Elena took one look at Clara, saw the exhaustion in her eyes and the determination in her posture, and knew she was looking at someone special. "Why are you here?" Elena asked during their first conversation, after the class had ended and the other women had left. Clara didn't hesitate. "Because I'm going to build something. Something so big that everyone who ever looked down on me will have to look up." Elena smiled. It was the smile of someone who recognized herself in another person. "Then let's get started." Over the next year, Elena became the mother figure Clara had lost, the mentor she desperately needed, and the first person in a long time who believed in her potential rather than her limitations. Elena taught her bookkeeping, customer relations, contract negotiation, and most importantly, how to see opportunities where others saw obstacles. Every wealthy person in this city pays someone to clean their home, their office, their investment properties, Elena explained one afternoon, showing Clara spreadsheets of the service industry. But most cleaning services treat their workers terribly and provide inconsistent quality. There's a gap in the market for something better, something trustworthy, professional, and ethical. The idea planted itself in Clara's mind and grew roots. She started researching business registration, licensing requirements, insurance needs. She studied at night, worked during the day, and slowly, painfully, saved every possible dollar. 18 months after being thrown out of the Vaughn estate, Clara registered Bright Hand Services as an LLC. Her entire business consisted of one person, herself, a shopping cart full of cleaning supplies, and a handmade flyer she distributed door to door in middle-class neighborhoods. The first month, she got 3 clients. The second month, 5. By month 6, she had 20 regular customers and had to hire her first employee, a single mother named Rosa who reminded Clara of herself. Clara's approach was different from every other cleaning service. She paid her workers above market rate, provided benefits, and trained them in customer service and professionalism. More importantly, she guaranteed the same cleaner for each client, building relationships and trust. When a client's home was cleaned by Bright Hands, they knew exactly who was coming, and they knew that person was vetted, professional, and cared about their work. Word spread. Referrals multiplied. Within 2 years, Bright Hands had contracts with 15 office buildings and over 200 residential clients. Clara had hired 30 employees and was operating in 3 cities. But success didn't come without battles. A business partner she'd trusted tried to embezzle funds, forcing Clara to learn about fraud detection and legal contracts the hard way. A major client withdrew at the last minute, nearly bankrupting the company before she secured emergency funding. Competitors spread rumors, attempting to damage her reputation. Each obstacle made her stronger. Each setback taught her something invaluable. And through it all, she remembered the rain, the mud, and the sound of the Vaughn's laughter. By year 4, Bright Hands Services was generating $3 million in annual revenue. Clara had moved from her tiny studio to a modest apartment, from public transportation to a used car, from exhaustion to something that almost resembled peace. She enrolled in night classes at the business school, earning her degree while running the company. She spoke at women's empowerment events, sharing her story of rising from homelessness to entrepreneurship. And slowly, quietly, she became known in business circles as someone to watch. The moment she'd been unconsciously waiting for arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, 5 years after she'd been thrown out in the rain. Clara's lawyer called with news about a potential acquisition opportunity. A luxury home, goods and cleaning products company was facing bankruptcy, drowning in debt and mismanagement. The company had brand recognition and valuable contracts, but the owners had made a series of catastrophic business decisions. It was available for a fraction of its actual worth, and Clara's company had both the capital and the expertise to turn it around. The company's name was Vaughn Estates. Clara sat in her office, staring at the acquisition proposal, and felt the past crash into the present with the force of a tidal wave. The Vaughn family's secondary business, the one they'd used to fund their lavish lifestyle, was now begging to be saved by the maid they'd discarded. She thought about letting it fail, about the poetic justice of watching the family that had humiliated her lose everything. But revenge through destruction wasn't who she had become. Revenge through success, however, through demonstrating undeniable superiority, that was something else entirely. Clara signed the acquisition agreement with a smile that would have terrified anyone who understood its meaning. The negotiation meeting was scheduled for 2 weeks later, in the boardroom of a prestigious downtown law firm. Clara arrived 30 minutes early, wearing a custom-tailored navy suit, her hair professionally styled, her presence commanding in a way that came from genuine confidence rather than performance. When the Vaughn family walked in, they looked diminished. Mrs. Vaughn's face showed new lines that plastic surgery couldn't hide. Mr. Vaughn, whom Clara had barely known during her time at the estate, looked defeated and old, and Vanessa, beautiful Vanessa with her perfect highlights and designer clothes, looked worried in a way that Clara found deeply satisfying. They didn't recognize her at first. She had changed too much, transformed too completely. To them, she was just another businesswoman, another stranger about to judge their failures. Clara let them settle into their chairs, let them shuffle their papers and exchange nervous glances. Then she spoke. Thank you for meeting with me. I'm Clara Daniels, CEO of Bright Hand Services. We've reviewed your company's financials and believe there's potential for a turnaround, but we'll need full cooperation and transparency moving forward. Her voice was calm, professional, betraying nothing. She watched as they nodded eagerly, desperate for any lifeline. Before we proceed, Clara continued, I want to make sure we're all clear on the terms. I'll be acquiring 100% of Vaughn Estates. Your family will retain no ownership stake, but will be offered consulting positions during the transition period. Mr. Vaughn started to protest, but Mrs. Vaughn placed a hand on his arm, silencing him. They had no leverage, and everyone in the room knew it. It was Vanessa who finally recognized her. Clara saw the moment it happened, the way Vanessa's eyes widened, the way her perfectly glossed lips parted in shock. You, Vanessa whispered, her voice barely audible. You're the maid, the one who stole Mother's... The one you falsely accused, Clara interrupted, her voice still calm, but now carrying an edge sharp enough to cut. The one you humiliated, recorded, mocked on social media? The one you threw out in the rain, with no evidence, no trial, no basic human decency? The room went silent. Mrs. Vaughn's face drained of color. Mr. Vaughn looked confused, trying to place Clara in his memory. Vanessa looked like she might be sick. That necklace, Clara continued, was later found in your daughter's room, if I remember correctly. The insurance claim was denied because the investigation revealed it was never actually stolen, just misplaced. Funny how that detail never made it to social media. Mrs. Vaughn wouldn't meet her eyes. The necklace had indeed been found 2 months after Clara's dismissal, wedged behind Vanessa's dresser, where it had fallen during a drunken party. The family had quietly retrieved it, never acknowledging their mistake, never apologizing, certainly never attempting to find Clara and make amends. I didn't come here for an apology, Clara said, standing up and walking to the window, looking out at the city she'd conquered one cleaned floor at a time. I came here because you're drowning, and I have the resources to save you. Or not. She turned back to face them, and in that moment, she embodied everything they had claimed she could never be. Respected, successful, powerful. Here's what's going to happen. I'm buying Vaughn Estates. Your family will vacate the management positions immediately. However, because I believe in second chances, something you never gave me, I'm offering you the option to stay in your home for 6 months while you transition to more modest accommodations. I'm also offering to retain some of your staff, protecting jobs that might otherwise be lost. Tears were running down Mrs. Vaughn's face now, quiet and undeniable. Mr. Vaughn looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Vanessa, however, was staring at Clara with something that looked less like remorse and more like calculation. Why would you help us? Mr. Vaughn asked, his voice hoarse. After what we did to you? Clara smiled, and it was genuine. Because I'm not you. Because I learned that real power isn't about crushing people beneath you. It's about rising so high they have to acknowledge you as an equal, whether they want to or not. The meeting concluded with signatures and handshakes, though the Vaughns' hands trembled as they signed away their company. Clara maintained her professional composure until she reached her car, and only then, sitting in the driver's seat, did she allow herself a moment of pure, overwhelming triumph. She had done it. Not through revenge, not through cruelty, but through relentless work and refusing to let their judgment define her worth. The following weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, restructuring, and media attention. The story of the maid who became a CEO was too good for the press to ignore. News outlets requested interviews, business magazines wanted features. And through it all, Clara maintained her dignity, telling her story not for sympathy, but to inspire others who had been told they were less than. Vanessa, however, was not handling the reversal of fortune well. Clara heard reports from the staff remaining at the Vaughn estate that Vanessa had become increasingly unstable, drinking heavily and ranting about the injustice of Clara's success. But Clara was too busy building her empire to pay much attention to her former tormentor's breakdown. That was her mistake. 3 months after the acquisition, Clara received a dinner invitation from Mrs. Vaughn, delivered with a handwritten note expressing desire for reconciliation. The note was elegant, apologetic, and seemed genuine. Against her better judgment and Elena's warnings, Clara agreed. The dinner was scheduled at the Vaughn estate, in the formal dining room where Clara had once served meals as an invisible servant. The irony wasn't lost on her as she arrived in her Mercedes, wearing a dress that cost more than a month of her former maid's salary. Mrs. Vaughn greeted her warmly, almost desperately, as if Clara's forgiveness could somehow restore what had been lost. The meal was prepared by professional caterers, served on the fine china Clara used to wash. Vanessa was notably subdued, barely speaking, her eyes following Clara's every movement. The conversation started carefully, touching on business matters and avoiding the painful past. Mrs. Vaughn praised Clara's success, asked about her expansion plans, and seemed genuinely interested in building a new, more respectful relationship. It was during the main course that Mrs. Vaughn excused herself to take a phone call. Leaving Clara and Vanessa alone at the table for the first time since the acquisition meeting. "You must feel very proud of yourself," Vanessa said, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Clara set down her fork carefully. "I feel proud of the work I've done, yes. I built something from nothing, treated people with respect, and succeeded on my own merit." "You destroyed our family," Vanessa hissed, leaning forward. "You took everything from us." "I took nothing," Clara replied calmly. "Your family destroyed itself through mismanagement and cruelty. I simply offered a solution when you were drowning." Vanessa's laugh was bitter. "A solution? How generous. The little maid swooping in to save us. You must love this." "I don't love it," Clara said honestly. "I don't hate you anymore, Vanessa. I pity you. You had every advantage in life and learned nothing from any of it. I had nothing and learned everything." The words hit their mark. Vanessa's face flushed with rage, and for a moment, Clara saw the same cruelty she remembered from 5 years ago flash in those eyes. Then Vanessa forced a smile, smooth and cold. "Would you like more wine?" Vanessa asked, her voice suddenly sweet, reaching for the bottle that had been placed on the sideboard. Clara nodded, thinking nothing of it, and turned her attention to her phone as an important email arrived. She didn't see Vanessa pour the wine. She didn't see the small vial of powder that Vanessa had been hiding in her sleeve, the rat poison she'd stolen from the garden shed that morning. She didn't see Vanessa's hand shake as she mixed death into Clara's glass with the casual ease of someone who had finally, completely, lost her grip on sanity. What happened next would be replayed in courtrooms, analyzed by lawyers, and reported in newspapers for months to come. Mrs. Vaughn returned to the dining room just as Vanessa was setting the poisoned wineglass in front of Clara's place setting. But in her nervousness and rage, Vanessa had placed it on the wrong side of the table, in front of her mother's seat instead. "I'm so sorry about that interruption," Mrs. Vaughn said, sitting down and immediately reaching for the wineglass, eager to calm her nerves with a drink. Everything happened in slow motion. Clara looked up from her phone. Vanessa's eyes went wide with horror. Mrs. Vaughn brought the glass to her lips. "Wait!" Vanessa screamed, lunging across the table. But it was too late. Mrs. Vaughn had already swallowed a large mouthful of the poisoned wine. The realization of what was about to happen played across Vanessa's face, like a nightmare made real. "No, no, no," she whispered, watching her mother set down the glass with a confused expression. "Vanessa, what's wrong with you?" Mrs. Vaughn asked, concerned by her daughter's outburst. Then the poison began to work. Mrs. Vaughn clutched her stomach, her face going pale. She tried to stand, but collapsed back into her chair, gasping for breath. Clara immediately pulled out her phone and dialed emergency services while Vanessa stood frozen, her hands covering her mouth, trembling violently. "Mom," Vanessa whispered, finally moving to her mother's side. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. It wasn't supposed to be. You weren't supposed to drink that." Clara's blood ran cold as she understood what had happened. The wine had been meant for her. Vanessa had tried to murder her, and her own mother was dying instead. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes, but by then, Mrs. Vaughn was unconscious, her breathing shallow and erratic. They rushed her to the hospital while police officers, responding to Clara's emergency call and her explanation of what she'd witnessed, detained Vanessa at the scene. Vanessa didn't resist. She sat in the dining room chair, staring at nothing, and said only one thing over and over. It wasn't meant for her. It wasn't meant for her. Mrs. Vaughn died 3 hours later in the intensive care unit, her body unable to survive the massive dose of poison that had been meant to kill Clara. The autopsy would later reveal that she'd ingested enough toxin to kill 3 people. The trial began 4 months later and became a media sensation. The story had everything: wealth, betrayal, revenge, and a shocking murder that nobody had seen coming. Vanessa was charged with first-degree murder, attempted murder, and assault with a deadly weapon. Clara sat in the courtroom every day of the trial, not out of revenge or satisfaction, but because she felt she owed it to Mrs. Vaughn, flawed as she had been, to bear witness to the truth. The evidence was overwhelming. The poison was found in Vanessa's room, purchased online using her credit card. Security cameras showed her taking the rat poison from the garden shed that morning. Her own confession, made to police and repeated in hysterics during the first days of her arrest, sealed her fate. The prosecution painted a picture of a woman consumed by jealousy and rage, unable to accept that the maid she'd once tormented had surpassed her in every meaningful way. Vanessa's defense attorneys tried to argue temporary insanity, but the premeditation was undeniable. She had planned this for weeks. During her testimony, Clara spoke clearly and honestly about everything: the years of humiliation, the false accusation, her rise from homelessness to success. She described the dinner invitation, the conversation, and the horrifying moment she realized what Vanessa had done. "Do you hate Vanessa Vaughn?" the prosecutor asked. Clara thought carefully before answering. "No, I pity her. She had every advantage I lacked, and she used those advantages to hurt people. I had nothing and chose to build something. We made different choices, and we're living with different consequences." The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Vanessa was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole for 15 years. When the sentence was read, she showed no emotion, her face as blank as porcelain. She had aged years in months, her beauty faded, her eyes hollow. As she was led away in handcuffs, she looked at Clara one last time. Clara met her gaze without flinching, without triumph, without anything but a profound sadness for how completely Vanessa had destroyed herself. Mr. Vaughn, who had lost his wife to his daughter's poisoning attempt and his daughter to her own hatred, sold the estate and disappeared from public life. The last Clara heard, he was living in a small apartment in another state, broken and alone. 6 months after the trial concluded, Clara stood in the auditorium of a women's shelter, preparing to give a speech to 300 women who were struggling with homelessness, abuse, and poverty. These were the women she'd been, once upon a time, when the world had convinced her she was worthless. She looked out at their faces, saw the exhaustion and the hope fighting for dominance in their eyes, and smiled. "They laughed when I worked as a maid," she began, her voice strong and clear. "They recorded my mistakes and posted them online for entertainment. They accused me of crimes I didn't commit and threw me out in the rain like garbage. And for a while, I believed them. I believed I was nothing, that I deserved their contempt, that people like me didn't get happy endings." She paused, letting the words settle. "But then I realized something. Their laughter didn't define me. Their cruelty didn't diminish me. Their judgment didn't determine my worth. I did, through every choice I made to stand up instead of staying down, to work instead of giving up, to build instead of destroy." Clara's voice grew stronger, filled with the passion of someone who had lived every word she spoke. "Today, Bright Hand Services employs over 200 people across 15 cities. We've created jobs, supported families, and proven that success isn't about where you start. It's about what you build. And more importantly, we've shown that treating people with dignity and respect isn't just morally right, it's good business." The applause started slowly, then grew into a standing ovation. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming emotion of having turned her pain into purpose. After the speech, women lined up to talk to her, to share their own stories of struggle and hope. Clara listened to each one, offering advice, resources, and sometimes just understanding. She hired 3 women that day for positions in her company, seeing in them the determination she'd once possessed. That evening, Clara drove through the city she'd once wandered as a homeless teenager, past the park bench where she'd slept, past the diner where she'd washed dishes, past the community center where Elena had first taught her that she could be more than the world expected. She pulled up in front of a building she'd recently purchased, a beautiful old structure that she was converting into a training center for women in domestic work, a place where they could learn business skills, financial literacy, and self-advocacy. The sign above the door read, "Elena Cruz Center for Women's Empowerment," named for the woman who had believed in her when no one else did. Elena had passed away 6 months earlier, surrounded by the women she'd mentored, including Clara. Her last words had been, "Keep building, keep believing, keep lifting others up." Clara stood in front of the building as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, and thought about the journey that had brought her here. From maid to millionaire, from powerless to powerful, from humiliated to honored. The Vaughns had laughed when she worked as a maid, had treated her like she was invisible, disposable, beneath their notice. They had thrown her out in the rain and never looked back. But Clara had looked forward. She'd built an empire from nothing, created jobs, changed lives, and proven that dignity and success weren't reserved for those born into privilege. She'd shown that the girl they'd mocked, the maid they'd discarded, the woman they'd tried to destroy, was stronger than all of them, combined. They laughed when she worked as a maid, but they didn't laugh for long. If this story inspired you, if it reminded you that your current circumstances don't determine your future, then I need you to do something. Leave a comment below telling me about a time someone underestimated you. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of resilience and transformation. And subscribe to this channel, because we're just getting started with stories of people who turned their pain into power and their struggles into success. Your story might be next. Remember, They can laugh at where you are today, but they won't be laughing when they see where you're going tomorrow. Keep building. Keep believing. Keep rising.